here. Tonight's shiur is always Lu Nishmat Avi Mari Dover Merva Nuvan Alevi Imi Marati Rachel Bat Harav Michael. And this week we are going to read the parsha of Vayishlach, which is a very interesting parsha in that it talks about the meeting again between Yaakov and Eisav. Yaakov returning home to finally to Eretz Yisrael. But tonight we are going to focus on the last chapter of the parsha, Perek Lamed Vav, if I'm not mistaken, which basically tells us all about Eisav's descendants, and it's basically the last we're going to hear from Eisav, and then we're going to move on with the story of Yaakov in next week's parsha. But before we take our leave from Eisav, we have a whole chapter dedicated to Eisav and his offspring, and we're going to try to see what the parsha name try to help us understand the purpose of this detail about Eisav is and why we have it here. So let's go to our sources and away we go. So interestingly enough, we're going to start, before we even get to this week's parsha, we have two sections in Parshat Toldot, which help us understand about Eisav's family. First is in Bereshit Perek Chavav Pasuk Lamed Daled, where we are told by Eisav ben Arba'im Shana, when Eisav is 40 years old, Vayikach Ishat Yehudit Bat Be'eri Hachiti, he takes for a wife a woman named Yehudit, the daughter of Be'eri, who is a Hittite, yet Basmat Bat Elon Hachiti, and another woman named Basmat, who is the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And the Torah there very simply adds one pasuk after that. They were you might translate a morat ruach. They were shortness of breath. You might say they were a thorn in the side of Yitzchak and Rivka. They didn't necessarily see eye to eye with Esav's choice of wives. And in Perek Chavchet, at the end of Parsha Toldot, we're told Vayelach Eisav el Yishmael, that Eisav goes to the family of Yishmael, Vayikach et Machalat bat Yishmael ben Avraham achot nevayot al nashav lo leisha, that he takes Machalat, the daughter of Yishmael. Yishmael, of course, the son of Avraham. Now Machalat happens to be the sister of Nevayot, Al Nashav, on top of his existing wives, to be a wife. So if we look here, look at Parshat Toldot, it seems that Eisav has three different wives named Yehudit, Basmat, and Machalat. We're going to go to this week's Parsha, and we're going to see a few changes here. And we're going to go right, let's go right to that. In our Parsha, we are told the following, Perek Lamed Vav, for those who want to follow along, the Eila Toldot Eisav hu Edom. These are the generations of Eisav, who is also known as Edom. And we know we go back again to the beginning of Parshat Toldot, we know how he gets the name Edom, presumably from the fact that either he was red, or from the fact that he liked red lentil soup. Whatever it might be, he gets the name Edom. Eisav lakachet nashav bibnot Canaan. Now it tells us interestingly that Eisav takes as wives from the daughters of the Canaanites at Ada bat Elon Hachiti, Ada the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Alivama bat Anah bat Sivon Hachivi. Alivama the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Sivon the Chivite. So again, two different wives, and then there's a third wife in a different who's not listed in those two, because those two were from the Canaanites, the Hittite, the Chivite. And then at Basmat bat Yishmael achot Nevayot, and Basmat, the daughter of Yishmael, who was the sister of Nevayot. Now again, you'll notice that the three wives' names seemingly do not correspond to the previous names. Yishmael's daughter above was called Machalat. The daughter of Elon the Hittite's name was given there as Yehudit, and the third wife, who is Basmat bat Elon, Yehudit, no. The daughter of Elon is Basmat, and this Yehudit bat Be'eri seems to have disappeared, and in her place we have an Alivama bat Anah bat Sivon Achivi. So we're going to try to see if there is indeed a correspondence between these three wives, or not. And the parshanim are going to go through that. But let's continue through. That's one thing I want you to notice now as we go through. We're going to see how the commentaries deal with this discrepancy between the names. Now it gives the names. It says Ada has a son called Eliphaz. Basmat has a son named Reuel. Olivama has three sons, Yeush, Yalom, and Korach. These are the sons of Eisav that are born to him in Eretz Canaan, we're told in Pasuk 5. Pasuk 6, Vayikach Eisav et Nashav, v'et Banav, v'et Benotav, v'et Kol Nafshot Beito. Eisav takes his wives, his sons, his daughters. By the way, we haven't seen any daughters mentioned up till now. We saw 5 sons mentioned, no daughters are mentioned by name. Could mean perhaps they're just not mentioned. Could be that they're maybe their daughter-in-laws. Don't know. That Kol Nafshut Beso, his entire household, that Mikneu, his cattle, that Kol Bemto, all of his animals, that Kol Kinyano, all of his possessions, Asheroch Ashbieretz Canaan, that he acquired while he was living in the land of Canaan, because that's where he was born. Vayelech el Eretz, and he goes to a land Mipnei Yitzchak Yaakov Achiv, in the face of Yaakov his brother. Why? Ki hayarech sham rav mishevet yachdav. Their possessions were too great for them to live together. V'lo yachla eretz migurehem laseit otam mipnei mikneihem, because the land of their sojournings, i.e., Eretz Canaan, was not able to sustain them because they had so much cattle, so many flocks. And then Vayeshev Eisav Har Seir, Eisav eventually dwells in Har Seir, and here it says again Eisav hu Edom, Eisav also known as Edom, the red one. And then it tells Eila told those Eisav Edom Har Seir. These are the generations of Eisav, the father, who is called the father of Edom. Again, there in the first one, when it says Eisav hu Edom, it's referring to Eisav. His name was Edom. In this verse, it's called Eisav is the Avi Edom. He is the father of the nation that is going to be called Edom. But Har Seir, when he gets to Har Seir, these are the new generations. Then first it lists his sons. It repeats them. They're the sons of Eisav were Eliphaz ben Ada and Reuel Basmat. Now then it takes these two, the first two, and it lists their children. Vayubnei Eliphaz, they were Teman, Omar, Tzvo, Gatam, Kenaz. And then Timna Haitap, he legesh Eliphaz and Ben Eisav. Eliphaz, in addition to his wife who had all these 5 sons, who is not mentioned, there is a concubine named Timna, who happens to have Batel Eliphaz et Amalek. She has a son who is named Amalek. These are all the children, the sons of Ada, the wife of Eisav, through Eliphaz. The Eila b'nei Reuel, then we go through the sons of Reuel, Nachat, Zerach, Shama, Miza. These were the sons of Basmat, Eshet Eisav, and the sons of Olivama, again, who's listed as Bat Ana Bat Tzivon. She's the daughter of Ana, who's the daughter of Tzivon. Eshet Eisav, the wife of Eisav. Atel Eisav and Yusha Yalom Korach. Same 3 sons we had mentioned above, and none of their descendants are mentioned. Then it tells us these were the chiefs of Eila Alufei b'nei Eisav, the chiefs in Eisav. From the family of Eliphaz, there were the following chiefs: Aluf Teman, Aluf Omer, Aluf Tzvo, Aluf Knas. And now here again we have Aluf Korach, where if you go above, we don't seem to have a son named Korach. We have an Eliphaz, a Teman, an Omer, a Tzvo, a Gatam, and a Knas. All of them appear, as well as Amalek, but Korach seems to have snuck in here, even though he's not mentioned above. What? Where is Korach mentioned above? Not among the sons of Ada. He's mentioned among the sons of Batmas. No. There's a Korach who is the son of Olivama. Olivama has a 3rd son is Korach, but here we have Korach listed among the sons of Eliphaz, the sons of Ada. Okay, so that's the parshanim. We're going to try to see whether there's 1 Korach or 2 Korachs. We'll talk about that. I hope we'll get to that also. And these are the sons of Reuel, Lufnachat, Zarach, Shama, Miza, Elif, Reuel. Those are the sons of Reuel, and these are the sons of Elivama. Again, Yush, Alam, and Korach, the same 3. Now it's interesting. In the first 2 wives, it's the grandchildren who are listed as Alufim. With the 3rd wife, it's the sons who are listed as the Aluf. So in other words, it seems that if we take Aluf as perhaps tribe, it seems that the first 2 wives each had 1 son. Those that son had multiple children. Each of the multiple children get their own tribe. Whereas with the third wife, who has three sons, the three sons are the tribes, not the grandsons. So that seems to be the division of the hierarchy of how Eisav groups himself, or the families group themselves once they get to Seir. And then it says, these are the sons of Eisav, these are the Alufehem, and he is Edom. Now, in theory, this is really the end of the genealogy of Eisav, but the Torah then adds a very interesting set of genealogies here. And again, we're going to try to understand why they're all here. Remember, Eisav lands in Edom, land of Seir. And now it tells us, Ela b'nei Seir hachori, these are the children of Seir, who was the Chorite, or whatever Chori means, Yoshvei Haaretz, who already dwelled in the land when Eisav got there. And they are Lotan, Shoval, Tzivon, Va'ana. We've seen those two names, Tzivon and Ana, we've seen before. I'm sorry, we've seen Ana before. We've had Tzivon. We've seen both of those as Livama bat Ana, bat Tzivon. So we're going to try to figure out here. It says the sons of Seir are Tzivon and Ana. Whereas later on, we're going to see that there's an Ana who is the son of Tzivon. If you see in verse 24, I've highlighted it again in purple. Now, first, before we get to that, we have Lotan Chori Vehema, Tan Timna. And remember, we had above a Timna, who was the concubine of Eliphaz. So we're going to try to see how these names all connect back into Eisav and why they're here. Now, these are the children of Tzivon and Ayah and Ana. This is Ana, who found certain Yemim in the desert when he was the shepherd for the donkeys for his father Tzivon. Okay, he found Yemim literally means mules. In other words, he crossbred the donkeys. He is the first person, it seems, to try to crossbreed donkeys with horses to get mules. At least that's what the parshat seems to imply there. And then these are the sons of Ana, were Dishon and Olivama bat Ana. Who we've seen before. And then it goes more sons, more children, and then lists these are the tribes of the Chorites, etc., etc., etc. Then we get in one final section before we say goodbye to Eisav, is these are the kings that ruled in the land of Edom, Lifnei Malach Melech B'nei Yisrael, before there was a king in Eretz Yisrael for the Jews. Vayimloch, but then it lists 8 kings and different things about them. We're going to skip over them. But we notice we have 3 different sections here. And then at the end, after it lists all these kings, it seems after all these kings that then they go back to listing them as tribes. These are now the tribes of Edom, Alufeya. So whether Aluf means the head of the tribe or the head of the clan or the clan name itself. And then it lists a bunch of clan names. So again, we have 3 different sections. One, which is the genealogy of Eisav, one, the genealogy of the native inhabitants of Seir, and the third section, which talks about different kings that ruled in Edom before the Jews merited to have a king. So we're going to try to understand, why does the Torah have these 3 sections and what do they all mean? That's tonight's focus. So let's go first, as we usually do, we go to Rashi. Now, Rashi is going to say, by the way, that the 3 wives that are mentioned in our parsha are the exact same 3 wives that were mentioned in Parshat Toldot. So when he says Ada bat Elon, he Basmat bat Elon. It's the same one who is in Toldot is given the name Basmat. Here she's given the name Ada. So the question is, if her name was Ada, why in Toldot is she given the name Basmat? The Nikret Basmat al Shem Shoitom Kateret Bisamim Lavodah Zarah. She would bring offerings of incense. So Bisamim, seeming to be related to the word Basmat, she brought incense to idols, and that's why she's called Basmat there in Toldot. Okay? By the way, we're going to see other different reasons, perhaps, why she's called Adad, why she's called Basmat, but it seems from Rashi that Ada is her real name, and Eisav called her something else, or the Torah calls her something else there to allude to something else. Generally, when we have the same person having multiple names in the Torah or in the Tanakh, we try to figure out which is the, quote, real name, the birth name, and which one is the name that's supposed to be a descriptive name that tells us something about their character. In this case, Rashi is saying that Ada is the real name and Basmat is the descriptive. The same thing here we're going to see again. Ahalivama is the same as Yehudit. Okay, the Yehudit that we had in parshat Toldot is called Alivama here. And presumably her Alivama is her real name. Why does Eisav called her Yehudit? V'hu kina shema Yehudit. Eisav, when he introduced her to his parents, called her Yehudit. Why? Lomar, to tell us she koferet ba'avoda zara. Yehudit, when we have the term Yehudi or Yehudit, the Torah tells us, is somebody who denies idolatry. Not necessarily the way we use Yehudi today as a Jew, because clearly Yehuda isn't even born when Eisav is getting married. Okay, but the term Yehudi, because it has the name, or it's very closely related to Hashem's four-letter name, refers to somebody who accepts monotheism and denies polytheism. Okay, denies idol worship. Now, but the reason he did that, by the way, was not because she really did. It was to make his father, his parents, think, oh, she's Yehudit. She's somebody who accepts God, who accepts monotheism, and that's why she's suitable to be a wife. That's Rashi's perspective. So when Rashi says, Ada is Basmat, Alivama is Yehudit, and of course, the daughter of Yishmael is the daughter of Yishmael, which we're going to see a little later why she gets a different name. But anyway, now Alivama is listed as Bat Ana, Bat Tzivon. And if you remember when we went through the leaders in Seir, we found an Tzivon and an Ana, both of whom seem to be males. So how can she be the daughter of Ana and the daughter of Tzivon? How can she have two fathers is the question Rashi's going to ask. If Imbat Ana, if she's Ana's daughter, Lo Bat Tzivon, how can she be Tzivon's daughter? Ana beno shel Tzivon. We know for a fact that Ana is Tzivon's son. Shenamar v'ela b'nei Tzivon. These are the sons of Tzivon. Vayav Ana. Aya and Anar. He has two sons. So how can this Alivama be the daughter of Ana and Bat Tzivon? Unless we say that Ana is her mother. We have two Anas. We have a male Ana and a female Ana, both who are descended from Tzivon, which seems very, very far-fetched, that he would have a son and a daughter with the same names. And that's why Rashi and the Parshanim are going to come up with different rationales for how can she be the daughter of two different males? How can that happen? Okay? So let's continue. Malame, this comes to teach us, Shebat Tzivon al Kalato Eshet Ana, that Tzivon was sleeping around with his daughter-in-law, Ana's wife, and Alivama is really Tzivon's daughter biologically, okay? But the biological mother is not Tzivon's wife, but Ana's wife, okay? The Yatzat Alivama Shnehem, and Alivama is the result of that relationship. So the Acho HaKasuv, and Rashi says the whole reason we have all of these psukim, this whole parsha, is simply to tell us Shekulan b'nei Mamzerot Hayu, that all of the children, all of the descendants of Eisav, as soon as Eisav left, he left everything behind, and they were all illegitimate children from all sorts of illegitimate and illicit relationships. That's what this has, why it's Bat Ana Bat Tzivon, Rashi wants to say. Okay, now we go back to the third wife, which is Basmat Bat Yishmael, and we said, remember before back in Parsha told us, she is called Machalat. Okay, Helen Karla Machalat. She's called Machalat. Why does she get two different names? Again, remember, one is the real name, the other is the Drash name. So in this case, Rashi is saying that, again, what we have in our parsha is the real name. What we had in Parsha Toldot is the Drash name. So, Matinu Agadot Midrash Sefer Shmuel. We find the following in the Agadah of Sefer Shmuel, that what? Shlosha Mochalin Lahen Avonotehem. There are three people who have their sins forgiven for them. And who are they? Ger Shenit Gayer. When a convert comes to convert, everything in their past, get a clean slate, is all wiped clean. Second is Va'ola Ligidula. Somebody is promoted to a significant job, who gets a promotion to a job, for such as somebody becomes, whether it's the Kohen Gadol, or he becomes the Nasi, or the Melech, or one of these. Because he's no longer a private individual, he's now a public official, all of those sins that he committed as a private individual are put on a different slate. He gets a new slate to start off as a public persona now, not all of that stuff that he did as an individual is all gone. And the third is Hanose Isha, somebody who gets married. When you get married, Your slate as a single person gets put aside. It's a different slate. Now you're part of a couple. You're part of a family unit. You now have a new slate. You get to start all over again. Mikan. And it seems this verse seems to be the source for that one who gets married has their sins forgiven and get a clean slate. Lekach nikret machalat. She's called machalat from the unit of limchol, to be forgiven. Shenimchalu avonoteha, that all of her sins, prior sins, were forgiven when she marries Eisav, because now she's starting a new chapter in her life. So all the sins from the old chapter get put aside, and we start with a whole new story, whole new chapter. And that's the source for that. So that's why she's called Machalat in one place and Basmat and Basmat, which is a real name, presumably in the other place. Okay, now, interestingly enough, Rashi has a very similar comment at the end of Tolos. Does it tell us that she's who her brother is? Who cares who her brother is? Right? Why? We know her father's son is Ishmael. Why does that tell us her brother is Nevayot? Al Shem Shui Sialo Mishamei Ishmael Nikret. Since he is the oldest brother, and he is the one who was responsible for completing the marriage after Yishmael, her father, who had promised her, already betrothed her, dies. Nevayot completes the marriage. He gets a mention here, even though he's already been mentioned back in Toldot. And Rashi there gives the same exact reason. That the reason he's mentioned again is because he is the one who stands in his father's place since his father has passed away, and quote gives her away at the wedding. Okay, now we go to Alivama has a son who's named Korach. And again, guess what? We're back to wonderful relationships. Because again, remember we said, is that Rashi's going to say that both Korachs are the same. Korach Zeh, this Korach who is listed among Alivama's sons, Yush, Yalam, and Korach. She has three sons. Mamzer Haya. He is also an illegitimate child. Uben Alifas Haya. He's not Eisav's son, even though Alivama is Eisav's wife. Eisav is not the father of this third son. Why? Sheba al Eshet Aviv. In other words, Eliphaz had relations with his stepmother. El Elivama Eshet Eisav. Shahare hu manui im alufei Eliphaz b'sof. Because later on we see, as I said, Korach mentioned twice, once under Alivama and once under Eliphaz. So obviously Eliphaz has something to do with it. And again, Rashi goes to the opinion that there's only one Korach. It's not two Korachs. It's the same Korach, and he's listed twice again to teach us this whole concept that there was more than one incestuous relationship going on here. That wasn't the only one. Okay, Lagura Vayishlach al Eretz. Why does he leave Eretz Yisrael? Lagur b'asher yimtza. Rashi says, interestingly enough, when Eisav first leaves, he doesn't have a specific destination. When he leaves Eretz Yisrael, he just wants to leave Eretz Yisrael to find a place to live. The Lo Yachla, why does he leave? As the pasuk tells us, there was not enough pasturage. Lo Yachla es migoreim laspik mir'ah lebehemot shelahem. Umidrash Agadah. Now Rashi interestingly quotes the Midrash, even though he says the pshat is very simply that Eisav leaves for financial reasons, that he just doesn't have enough base to support both him and his brother. He wants to leave and go find a place where he can prosper. However, he quotes the Midrash. The Midrash says the following: Mipnei Yaakov achiv. He left because of Yaakov, his brother. Why? Mipnei shtar chov. Because there is a promissory note that is due. Shel gezerat yer yezaracha, which Hashem told Avraham that no, your children are going to be slaves. They're going to be strangers. They're going to be slaves for 400 years. Hamutal al zaro shel Yitzchak. Since Avram passed the Eretz Yisrael over to Yitzchak, when you get Eretz Yisrael, it comes with this before you're going to inherit Eretz Yisrael, you got to go through 400 years of suffering. If you want to do that, that's fine. Then you can have Eretz Yisrael. If not, forget it. You can't get it. So Eisav said, hey, Amar Elech Li says, if I leave Eretz Yisrael and I go, I don't want any part of this gift if it comes with this $400 or 400-year a problem attached to it. Not interested. Thank you. You take it, Yaakov. It's all yours. Be my guest. Habusha, and Rashi quotes the second reason, Habusha Shamachar B'chorato. And also, he leaves Eretz Yisrael because he's embarrassed that he sold his birthright. Okay. Again, that's both from the Midrash, but clearly, as I said, Rashi says, Pshat is the reason he leaves is because he wants to be able to have enough pasturage without having to fight all the time with Yaakov. Interestingly enough, very, very similar to the story of Lot and Avram with the shepherds, how they separate and go their separate ways also. Okay, Ela toldot shalidu b'dav achshav mishalach b'seir. Now, Rashi says that while Eisav is living in Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan, he only has children. He doesn't have any grandchildren yet. That when he leaves, he's leaving only with his children, and all the grandchildren are born after he gets to Seir. Okay. Now, we continue with when it listed Eliphaz's sons, it told us that Timnah was his concubine. Now, why does it have to list that? Rashi says very interestingly. What is the purpose of this pasuk telling us that he had a concubine? Her name was Timnah. Lodia, because she's the only, by the way, she's the only wife mentioned among the children. Esav's wives are mentioned, but Timnah is the only one mentioned. None of the others have a wife mentioned by name. It's his wife, this wife, but children, and no wives. But Timnah is mentioned. And why does Rashi want to say? Why does she mention Lodia Gidulato Shel Avraham? This is to show us how great the Avram was treated by the locals, not just by the Jewish people, by everybody in there. How far Avram's fame had spread. Avram was so well respected that everybody wanted to marry into his family. Okay. Timnah Zu, this Timnah, because where do we find her? She's Bat Alufim Haita. She is leader. She's a daughter of the Seir HaChori. She's like right up there. She's like royalty in Seir. So why would she want to marry a commoner like Eisav? Shenemar, as Rashi proves, Lachot Lotan Timnah. Timnah is the sister of Lotan. And Lotan, Me'alufei Yoshvei Seir Haya. Lotan is one of the leaders, the chieftains in Seir. Minachorim. From among the Chorim who lived there before Eisav arrived. So we see she's royalty, and yet she wants to marry into Esav's family. Amra, she said to herself, if I can't be your wife, I should at least be your concubine. So she wanted so much to join Avram's family. So this whole verse is to show us how well respected Avram was in the non-Jewish world. Okay, now we get into who is this Timnah really? Who are her parents? Where does she come from? Because it's interesting because Lotan is listed among the sons of Seir. It lists the sons of Seir, Lotan, Chori, Hemam, whatever, and then it says that he has a sister Timnah. Why isn't she just listed among the children of her father? Why is she listed? Oh no, he had a sister. U'v'divrei Hayamim. Now, interestingly enough, in Divrei Hayamim, Mona Ota b'banav shel Eliphaz. She is listed among the children of Eliphaz, not as Eliphaz's concubine, but as a child of him. What does that mean? The Lamed just comes to teach us the two verses which seemingly don't contradict. Sheba alishto shel Seir, v'yatza Timnah mebeinehem. As Eliphaz slept around quite a bit. Remember, we already saw him that he slept with his father's wife. He slept with Seir's wife also, and Timnah is the result of his sleeping with Seir's wife. When she grows up, when she grows up, he makes her his concubine. V'zeu, and this is why the Torah introduces her not as a daughter of Seir, but Machot Lotan Timnah. She is a sister to Lotan. V'lomana im b'nei Seir. She's not listed among the children of Seir. Why should Achotel mean ha'aim the lo min ha'av? She's only his half sister because her mother was her father is Eliphaz, not the father of all the other children. Okay, these are the chapter heads, and again, Rashi, as I said, Rashi is focusing, as we see, on explaining as he goes along with his perspective that one of the primary purposes for this chapter is to show us the incest that is going through both of these families, the family of Seir and the family of Eisav, and clearly, so when they join together and form one family, clearly there's a lot of promiscuity going around. Okay, now again, the Rashi now is going to quote some Midrashim on the inhabitants of Seir. They are Yoshvei Haaretz. Again, Rashi starts with the Pshat, Yoshvei Kodem Sheba Eisav L'Sham. They were the inhabitants before Eisav arrives. That's the pshat Yoshvei Haaretz. However, Rabotenu Darshan, Chazal give it to Rashi. What is this Yoshvei Haaretz? They were the inhabitants, the dwellers in the land. Shahayu b'kiyim b'yeshuva shel aretz. They were excellent. They were experts in being able to settle an area. Malay kanezel is a tim. Malay kanezel gifanim. They could tell by this. They were soil experts, so they knew this soil is great for planting this crop. This soil is great for this crop. Shahayu to'amim ha'afar. They would taste the dust. The yodim ezen the tiaru, and they would know what was the appropriate plant to plant there. That's why it says Yoshvei Haaretz. They knew how to settle places because they were experts in land cultivation. Okay, we're going to skip the next one. That's Vayavana, just the diktuk one. Okay, one no. Okay, now it says that these are the sons of Tzivon, Aya, and Anah. Now then it says who Anah. This is Anah Hamur Lemala, who is said above, who is listed above. Shu Achiv Shel Tzivon. He's listed here as Tzivon's son, yet earlier he's listed as Tzivon's brother. How do you think that happened? Karan Karyo Tobino, here he's called his son, Melame, to teach us. But Tzivon al Ima, Anna. Tzivon had relations with his mother, and that's where Anna comes from. So Anna is his son because he's the biological father. He's his brother because they share a mother. So again, another example Rashi gives here. Okay, Yemim is Pradim is the mules. Here Bia Chamor al Sus, he had a male donkey with a female horse. The Yolda parrot, that's how he got a mule. The Hoya Mamzer, he was an illegitimate child. He also brought crossbred animals into the world. Why are they called Yamim? From She'ematan Mutelet al Abriot, because people are very much afraid of wild mules. He says, you can't, if you have a wild white mule, forget it. It bites you, your history. You'll never recover from it. Okay. Or the wound will never heal. You may survive, but the wound will never heal. The lo huskak lichtov mishpot hachari. And Rashi says the only reason all of these descendants are listed Timna, because of Timna, as we said, Lodia Gedulat Zera Avram, show us how great Avram and his descendants were well respected. And that's as far as Rashi goes. Now, Ramban is going to go in a different direction on a lot of this stuff, and we're going to see how far we can get into Ramban, because Ramban is very, very long on this parak, but very, very detailed. So let's go. Now, again, we started with the three names, okay? So we said that Ada, at first Ramban is going to quote Rashi, says that Ada is Basmat, Olivama is Yehudit, and Basmat is Machalat, and again, changes the name. All of this is free quotes Rashi. Vine. Now, he says, I have a problem with Rashi, okay? Because Rashi explains that Olivama and Yehudit are the same one, but Yehudit is listed as Bat Be'eri. Olivama is listed Bat Tzivon. They don't, not only is the name changed, but the father's name changed. How can we be so sure it's the same person? How can we be sure that something else didn't happen here? Okay. There is no, Rashi doesn't address why Olivama, if Olivama is indeed Yehudit, then why does her father's name change from Be'eri to Anah? Ubasmat bat Yishmael, and by the name Basmat, the daughter of Yishmael, Yeshem Ha'etzem. He says that's her name. But wait a minute. In the case of what's her name? The other wife who's called Basmat. He said that Basmat is her Adah is called Basmat because she brought incense. So is Basmat a real name or is it a name that's it's a descriptive name? Ubibreshit Rabbah Amra. In Breshit Rabbah, they explained as follows: Natan Eisav datolit gayer. Eisav wanted to convert his wives. Machalat, so therefore Machalat shemachala HaKadosh Baruch Hu al avonotav. And why is she called Machalat? She's called Machalat because HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgave her sins when she came and married Eisav. Basmat shenit basmat dato Allah. That means he was very, very positive. He's at ease with selecting her to be his wife. So basmat means nit basma. She was adorned. Her adornments gave him comfort or made him feel good. Now we've described both her names, Basmat and Machalat. We've explained, used both of them as descriptive. So what's her real name? Both of them are descriptive terms. Now we don't even know what her real name was, the daughter of Yishmael, because we use both of these terms as descriptive of her character. That's why Ibn Ezra says, Ibn Ezra says, she had two names, her father had two names, I guess, whatever. Okay? That's what Ibn Ezra says. But Rambam doesn't like that. Vitachin Lomar. Rambam says it's just as equally, rather than trying to force the fact that these two are the same and the names, both the father's name and her name change, Tachin Lomar, Kishtayim HaNashim, Hahem, Meitu Below Banim. The two first wives that are mentioned died without kids. So that's why they're not mentioned here, because here we're not interested in Esav's wives. We're interested in his offspring. So perhaps those two wives that are listed in Toldot died, and he took two other wives. Ulai, and perhaps even since they were so vexing to Yitzchak and Rivka, maybe Hashem killed them off. They died young, without kids. Now, in this case, Vinasa Achod Ishtobat alone. So in other words, in one case, he marries her sister, because the father's name didn't change, remember. So maybe it was her sister. Married her younger sister, older sister, whatever. The Akaret, and he married another wife, who was Elivama Bat Anah. Avabat Yishmael Achot Nevayot, but the daughter of Yishmael was Nevayot, sister Bivor Shehayal Hashem Keor B'Lashon HaKodesh. Since her real name in Hebrew has a very bad connotation. What is that? Machalat. Machalat, even though the Medrash wants to connect it to Machol, to forgiving of sins, Machalat, this comes from Machala, a plague. You want your daughter to be named Plague? Not hardly. I don't think so. You don't want your wife to be called Plague. So therefore, Kara et Shema v'Shem HaNichbad Asher Ayali Ishto Rishona. So he gives her the name Basmat, which was his first love, his first wife, who he really loved. Why? Bilashon b'samim, because she was like perfume in it to him. He loved her. Now this Basmat, who's Yishmael's daughter, who Machalat is her name given. Personally, Machalat in Egyptian means something different, but in Hebrew it didn't have a good connotation. So he wanted to give her a different name. So he picks Basmat, the name his first wife who's died had, because he loved his first wife. Even since she's now from Yishmael, from the family, she'll get along better with the parents, with the in-laws. No problems. Wonderful. So Ramban is trying to say that no, they're not all the same three wives. One is the same, couple have changed. Okay, now Eisav goes and leaves Eretz Yisrael. Eisav takes his wives, his sons, his daughters. Zahmasa, this travel of Eisav to Har Seir, to leaving Eretz Yisrael, Haya Acharei Shuv Achiv Mecharan Ve'achazu Eretz Canaan. This is already after Yaakov has returned from Haran, and he has now taken hold of Eretz Yisrael. He's already living in Eretz Yisrael. Kimosha Amar Khan, as it says there, that when Yaakov returns, he buys a piece of land, he settles, then he finally gets to Chevra, and he's living with his father. The Afshar Shaya Gamach Remot Avihem, and it's entirely possible that Eisav doesn't leave Eretz Yisrael until Yitzchak dies, which would make sense with what we know about Yitzchak's relationship with Eisav, A, and B, the fact that Eisav is mentioned as being at his father's funeral. So it would seem to make sense, Ramban said, it's entirely possible that Eisav lives in Eretz Yisrael alongside his brother for the 20 years after he gets back until his father dies. From the time Yaakov returns from Lavan, from being away, till Yitzchak dies. But the only problem is we know that Eisav already had some type of presence in Seir while Yaakov was in Haran. Why? Because when he at the beginning of the parshat it says, where does Yaakov send the messengers to? He sends them to Artos to Seir to Edom. He sends them to Seir to Sedei Edom, because presumably that's where he expects to find Eisav. Kakatuv Lamala. So now we have a problem. If we just said that he doesn't leave until after Yitzchak dies, how could he already have been in Seir when Yaakov's returning from Lavan? So Ramban's going to try to reconcile those two. Avala Inya. Here's the scoop. Ki Eisav halach l'Seir b'mei alufei ha'chorio shvei ha'aretz. Eisav already went to Seir before this, during the days when the Chori were living there. And he became an important officer. How do we know he was an officer? Because he's walking, he's leading a platoon of 400 men. That's how he comes to meet Yaakov, right? But now, however, this whole time, he's off doing his thing in Seir. Ramah wants to say this whole time, he hasn't moved. He just went out, that was where he went to work. He went to work militarily, going out and leading a group of men from Seir. Perhaps he had a small piece of property there somewhere in the valley. The Lo Bahar Seir, not on the mountain of Seir, which was their strong fortress, the strong border point. That's why when Yaakov sends, he goes to Eretz Seir, to Sedei Edom, to the field, not to Har Seir. After Yaakov returns to Eretz Canaan, then he turns away. He yada, because he knew Eretz Canaan nachalat achiv. That Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan, is the land that his brother is going to inherit because his father gave it to him as part of the bracha. He heard the bracha, the father gave him Eretz Canaan, that's it, you get it. So therefore, he takes his whole entourage, and he goes to Seir to live there. And then when he gets there, he now wages war against the Chorites to conquer them. Perhaps when they saw his huge entourage, they started getting worried. They didn't want to let him in. They didn't want to let him pass the fortifications of Har Seir because that was their defense line. And they were afraid he's coming with all this. We don't know if he's coming in peace. So they went out to war against him and he had to conquer them. But he was just trying to go back to where he originally lived in Stay Edom. But Hashem helped Eisav conquer them. And Eisav and his descendants took over. As we read about in Sefer Dvarim, when Moshe is beginning to tell Am Yisrael about what's going on, he said that Eisav was able to conquer Seir from the Chorim. That's why later on in Dvarim, we are told that Hashem tells Am Yisrael, you can't conquer Eisav now, because that's Esav's inheritance that Hashem gave him. So how did Hashem give it to him? Because Hashem helped him win his war. The Tama Yelech El Eretz. Why did he go why did he leave Eretz Yisrael? Amrunklus El Eretz Acheretz. He went somewhere else, anywhere else. He wanted to go anywhere else. Rashi also explained, when he first leaves, he doesn't have any specific destination. He just wants to go to get away from Yaakov. He will go anywhere where he can find a place to rest. But he ends up in Har Seir because I guess that was his familiar route. So he goes there, and that's where he ends up. On Nachon Day 9, that seems to be Rashi. Now, I said, Sheyomar Vayishlach El Eretz Seir. It really means when the pasuk says Vayishlach El Eretz, it doesn't mean that he went just randomly decided he wasn't going to go, but he knew he was going to Eretz Seir. The Chasru HaKinoi, but the word Seir is just missing. Yoto move on, because it was obvious to any reader that if Eisav was leaving Eretz Canaan, he's going to go to Eretz Seir because that's where he already has established the presence. That's where he's going to go. We already saw before Eretz Seir that he had already established some type of presence in Seir. Obviously, if he's going to move his whole family, he's going to move to a place that's comfortable. He's already scouted it out. He already knows what it's like. That's why later on it says Vayishev Eisav that Eisav lives in Har Seir. And he gives other examples of where a word is left out because it's obvious. I'm going to skip all of those. Okay, it's as if he to the land, and we know that it's which land he was going. Now, interestingly enough, Ramban doesn't agree with the pshat. The pshat that we said that Eisav left because there wasn't enough pasturage in Eretz Yisrael. And Ramban finds that hard to believe. That two brothers are so wide that all of Eretz Yisrael can't hold them. It seems a little far fetched to Ramban. So, and I guess perhaps Rashi doesn't bad Nihil because Rashi never lived in Eretz Yisrael. Whereas Ramban, who lived in Eretz Yisrael for a few years, maybe he had a little better insight into how large Eretz Yisrael was. I don't know. Because I don't think Ramban wrote this after he got to Eretz Yisrael, but I think he perhaps maybe had a better idea of the geography than Rashi did, perhaps. Okay, Tamo, what it really means is not that Eretz Yisrael was too small to hold him. It really means Ir Megurehem. He Chevron Asher Gar Sham Avram Yisrael. Really, the city of Chevron was not big enough for the two of them. There's not that much pasturage, whatever. Ki Eretz Canaan, Tisa Kazdevik Kazdei Pamim. Eretz Canaan is large enough to hold not only all of their flocks, but 1,000 times their flocks. Aval Eisav Biroto Kilo Yuchal Amod Be'ira, when he saw that he could no longer live in his home, his birthplace of Hebron, Ubimkomo Azavit Kol Haaretz Lachiv Alach. He decides to leave Eretz Yisrael completely and go. Can't be in Hebron. Don't want to be here at all. That's the Ramban's pshat. Okay. Ela toldot Eisav aviyadom mahar seir. Bal haskir toldot asher holidu banav asher hofli molis seir. Now it comes to tell us that Eisav's children had children after they got to Seir. Kihu lo holicham. Eisav does not have any further children once he leaves Eretz Yisrael. But again, it repeats his children that were born in Eretz Yisrael to begin the genealogy tree. Lomar Elifaz El. In other words, Ramban is not saying that the Esav's children were born in Seir. They weren't. They were born in Eretz Yisrael, but their children were born in Seir. Now, interestingly enough, the reason Alivama's children are listed, even though it doesn't list the grandchildren, because they are already listed at the beginning. The reason they are listed here is because they become heads of clans, heads of tribes. It has to mention them because they don't divide into sub-clans like the first two brothers do. So therefore it lists them and it lists all the brothers. Okay. The Timna Haitapi Legish. Now, Ramban says, none of the other mothers are mentioned. As I said, Esav's wives are mentioned, but none of his children's wives, none of his grandchildren's wives are mentioned except for this Timnah. Therefore, Chazal say, like Rashi quotes like Rashi, and he agrees with Rashi that this is why this pasuk is mentioned, why her name is mentioned. The Tacheng, and now he goes a little bit further. He says, you have to understand, this Eliphaz has sons. Eliphaz has 5 sons through his wives, whoever they were. It doesn't mention his wife, wives, whatever. The 5 sons that are mentioned. Amalek, who is the son of the concubine, he doesn't figure in with his brothers. He's a separate entity into himself. He's included in the children of Eisav because he's a descendant of Eisav, but he's not part of Eliphaz's family. In other words, there's the Eliphaz and his clans, and then there's Amalek, who is a separate entity, Ramban wants to say. V'utzmach kotav lomar ki imo ploni dasher huno dala yoladato Eliphaz. And that's why it has to give his mother's name. Aval einenu bichlal b'nei Eisav. He's not really included. He doesn't live with Eisav. He lives on his own place. He doesn't live with the rest of the family. Your wife's children are called your descendants. Your concubine's children are her children. They're not your children. They don't inherit the same way that the children. The children, the sons of the concubine, don't inherit with the rest of the sons of the wife. Kimosha asaviv, just like we see, well, not with his father, but with Avram Avinu, and where the again, there's a difference between children of the father and children of the wives and children of the concubines. Now, Ramban says one of the primary reasons we have this whole parsha. This whole parsha is here to give us the following information. We have a mitzvah. One of the 613 mitzvahs that we get in Sefer Dvarim is we're not allowed to hate an Edomite. And that's why after 3 generations they can convert and become Jews. However, we're also told in Dvarim we're not allowed to take over the land of Edom. We're not allowed to inherit because it's Eisav's inheritance. The Haim, who is included in these parts that we're not supposed to hate? Kol banav hayeduim lo hayoshvim b'seir. This is to include all of the offspring who are part and listed as part of the family, who are living in Seir, ki Haim hanikroim Edom al shmo. Those ones were called Edom after Eisav. Avo ben hapilegesh, this son of the concubine, eino bichlal b'nei Eisav. He's not included with the sons of Eisav. The lo imohem ba'artzam, and he's not included in their territorial area. And therefore, and after they came and attacked us, therefore we need tabinu b'behepa l'tayvo tov l'imchodet shmo, and we are commanded to wipe him out, destroy him, and erase his name. So it's interesting. Ramban says one of the primary reasons we have this whole parsha is so that we understand that there's Eisav and there's Amalek, and they're 2 separate entities. Even though Amalek is part of Eisav, it's a part that's not reckoned and not considered part of Eisav. It's its own nation, and that's the primary. As I said, as opposed to Rashi, says the whole parsha is here to teach us that they were all products of incestuous relationships. That's not Ramban's pshat. Ramban's pshat, the whole reason this parsha is here. Obviously, there are other lessons, but the primary reason this parsha is here is to teach us to differentiate between the offspring of Edom, who we're not allowed to hate, and the offspring of Amalek, who we are supposed to wipe out their philosophy. Okay, I think my time is up, so I'm going to have to stop here because even though there's plenty more, as you can see, I just wanted to close with one very, very brief thought here about the whole concept of Eisav, his wives, and his family, and if we had none of this parshanut, we would have simply said that this parsha is here just like many of the other parashot in Bereshit. Just like before we start talking about Avram, we go and we talk about all of the 10 generations, and then we don't go a whole lot of detail. Before we get to Yitzchak, we talk about Yishmael and his children. And here, before we are now going to focus the rest of Bereshit and basically the rest of the Torah on Am Yisrael, on Yaakov and his descendants, we really need to close the book, Kiviyachol, on Eisav. And that's really what I think the parsha is doing here, at least from a very global sense. It really comes to tell us, okay, here's Eisav. He's the son of Yitzchak. We got to talk about him. And after that, we're going to basically finish. He doesn't appear again until we get to Dvarim, where we talk about a lot of different things. But basically, the rest of the Torah is now going to focus on Yaakov and his children and on the whole play out of Jewish history in terms of how the 400 years are going to play out and how we're going to end up in Egypt. And Hashem is going to redeem us. And we hope and pray that we should merit once again that Hashem should look at us and see us, see our afflictions and see all the challenges we're going through and redeem us again. B'mehera v'yameinu. Thank you all. I'll open it up now for questions, comments, or feedback. Anybody questions? Any questions? Okay, if nobody has any questions, I'm going to say Shavua Tov to everyone. Have a great rest of the week. And a Shabbat Shalom. And Be'ez Hashem, we'll see you back next week. Be'ez Hashem on our regular Wednesday evening time. Lila Tov.